Welcome to Financial Issues, where we join reality with truth, helping you make the most of your money by honoring God with your investments. Now listen in as we give you the practical tools and advice you need to become a biblically responsible investor.
Good morning. Welcome to Financial Issues. Thanks for tuning in today. We've tuned into a program that is purpose is to help educate you about financial issues from a biblical worldview, to help you balance out what's going on in the world and the markets and the financial systems with through the lens of Scripture, remembering what's most important as believers. So for $132 a year, you can partner with us. And when you do that, you get to defund darkness and fund the light. So defund darkness through a biblically responsible investment strategy that we offer exclusively to our partners, and be encouraged on a consistent basis to fund the light, to be a joyful, generous, and obedient giver. Folks, our phone lines are open this morning. If you want to be the first caller in the queue today, 610-363-1110 is the number that you call. If you're watching along on social media or one of the other outlets that we have video on, you'll see the phone number up there on the screen. 610-363-1110 is how you get first place in the queue. Our stewardship verse today comes from Proverbs 3:9. Honor the Lord with your possessions and with the first fruits of all your increase. So here we see in the scripture that giving is not limited to just the tithe or the tenth or the first fruits. We are to honor God with all our possessions and with our increase. So when we truly understand how much God loves us, and I'm not sure that any of us really get that fully. I know I don't. But when we truly understand how much God loves us and has given for us and to us, our unbridled, pure response is humble gratitude. That gratitude leads to a desire to give to God anything He asks, because we know that we can trust His commands and we can follow His commands because we know how much He loves us. And when we get the deepest revelation of His love for us, we become willing to give Him everything. So tithing is the giving that we do based on or calculated on the increase that comes to us. But when we give the first back to God to show that we believe that it actually all belongs to Him. Honoring God with our wealth and possessions can cover a lot of different stewardship practices. But our ministry exists to give believers a very practical and actionable strategy and way to honor God in the way that we invest. So we screen out companies who are profiting from activities that the Lord detests, like abortion, pornography, the promotion of the LGBTQ agenda, and or we screen out other activities where companies are using shareholder dollars to fund those dark agendas. Let's get to some financial issues, some economic news. The stock markets ended yesterday higher. The Dow up 0.3%, the S&P up 0.72%, and the NASDAQ up almost 1.6%. Now, the pre-markets this morning are in negative territory, indicating a negative open. The Dow close to the flat line, the S&P indicating an open down about 1/3 of a point, and the NASDAQ about 2/3 of a point, indicated to open in the negative. So the pressure in the pre-markets this morning comes from disappointing earning results from Alphabet, which is down somewhere around 7%, Apple and AMD. These are all companies who have pushed the tech-heavy S&P 500 and the even more tech-heavy NASDAQ higher over the last couple of years. So Apple's down almost 3% this morning in the pre-markets on shots fired back by China in the trade war. So there's news out that regulators in China are considering launching a formal investigation into Apple's App Store and the way that they charge fees to their developers, saying that costs to Chinese app developers are higher and more unfair. What about tariffs? Well, the U.S. Postal Service said late yesterday, that they were temporarily suspending inbound international packages from China and Hong Kong. They didn't really state the reason, but it would make sense to me that they were trying to comply with President Trump's revocation of the de minimis rule for China, which previously allowed small packages under $800 to enter the U.S. duty-free. Now, this would likely hold up your Temu and Shein orders even more, make the delivery time even longer if they had actually done it. So I saw a headline just right before the show started that they actually reversed course on this policy this morning, the U.S. Post Office, that is, saying that they will not hold up delivery. So your Temu and Shein packages are safe, at least for now. So what is the real impact of tariffs that haven't even really started yet? Well, look into a few specific companies. Mattel is that's a toy maker. They make Barbies and Hot Wheels, and they source about 40% of their products from China. So they said in their earnings call that they are considering price increases because of the tariffs, but that they are looking at making their supply chains more efficient. That, reading between the lines, that probably means that they'll try to get some items in their supply chain from places other than China, or places where tariffs are imposed, or relocating production before they decide to pass on the cost of those tariffs to the consumers. So this is good news. You know, this really refutes the notion that we're going to see, a lot of inflation caused by tariffs. I think companies are going to be careful about passing on cost to consumers who are already experiencing prices that are 20 to 50% higher in some cases. So Chipotle is another publicly traded company. They're a restaurant, and they weighed in on the tariff topic in their earnings calls, saying that they're not really concerned about that either. At worst, they could see their cost increase by about 60 basis points. That's almost 0.5%. That's very small percentage. They said that only, what was surprising to me, they said only half of their avocados come from Mexico. I think somewhere around 90% of avocados in the United States come from Mexico, but apparently they source their avocados more domestically, or at least half of them anyway. Also news, the Waffle House. I don't know, do y'all have Waffle Houses up there?
Shana, but not really. So in the western part of the state, we do. It seems like it's more of a southern thing. I don't see them a lot around the city.
Actually, Seth, the one time I've been to a Waffle House was outside of Lancaster.
There you go. Yeah, so it's about 45 minutes. About 45 minutes west of us, Shanna.
They're everywhere here. So it was big news. I can imagine. It was big news for us. So surcharges, 50 cents per egg. Is what they're tacking on. So, the left is really trying to pin this egg inflation on Trump. Watch this dishonest reporter try to do just that in this clip.
You mentioned the inflation executive order the president signed, but egg prices have skyrocketed since President Trump took office. So what specifically is he doing to lower those costs for Americans?
Really glad you brought this up, because there is a lot of reporting out there that is putting the onus on this White House for the increased cost of eggs. I would like to point out to each and every one of you that in 2024...
Sorry, Shana, that clip cut off early for some reason.
Okay. lot of, most of the birds to prevent the spread of it. And in since 2022 to 2025, there have been 148 million birds in the U.S. that were culled or killed because of the bird flu. So, I bring this up to illustrate my belief that those in opposition to Trump making America great again, or rather, I should say, God using Trump to make America great again, or the ones on the left that are opposed to this are refining their gaslighting skills to convince us that Trump is responsible for inflation and every problem in the world when he hasn't even been in office for the last 4 years. So, got to take a break here. We'll come back. Our phone lines are open. If you want to be the first caller in the queue, 610-363-1110 is the phone number. I'm your host, Shana. We're taking a break, but we'll be right back.
Navigating through investment options can be challenging, especially when you're determined to uphold your God-given values. Every dollar you invest is a vote for the world that you want to live in. Let your values guide your investment decisions and help to shape the culture in which we live. Become a beacon of light and pave the way with biblically responsible investing. Timothy Plan, where faith and finance collide. Before investing, carefully consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of the investment company. This and other important information can be found in the fund's prospectus. To obtain a copy, visit timothyplan.com or call 800-846-7526. Read each prospectus carefully before investing. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal.
My name is Reagan Gardner, and I am in the 4th grade. Last year, I wanted to be like everybody else. I thought I had to act different, look different, and be different to be cool. When I joined Crossroads, I learned that God loves me just the way that I am.
Help reach more kids like Reagan with the hope of the gospel. To learn more about Crossroads Kids Club and how you can get involved, visit reachourschools.com.
Through the ministry of Preborn, the Financial Issues family has saved tens of thousands of lives of babies. What an amazing job that God has done through you, the financial in saving the lives of babies. What an amazing reunion we will have in glory, meeting all the people that we have saved. Please go to preborn.org, that is preborn.org, or financialissues.org, and click on the Preborn banner.
Securities offered through G.A. Reppel & Company, a registered broker-dealer and investment advisor, member FINRA and SIPC. Opinions expressed by Shana are hers alone and are for informational purposes only, and do not necessarily represent those of G.A. Reppel or the outlet on which you are listening. You should consider how the information applies to your situation prior to personally implementing it, and consult any financial professional you work with to make sure it's applicable to your financial plan.
Welcome back to Financial Issues. Phone lines are open, 610-363-1110. You'll be the first caller in the queue, and you got just a minute or two to get your call queued up if you want to get into the show here, 610-363-1110. So before the break, we showed you a clip about a press conference. Trump's press secretary, Caroline, is it Levitt?
It's Levitt. And by the way, isn't she a breath of fresh air from Karine Jean-Pierre?
She's as good as Kayleigh McEnany.
She does a great job. She does a great job.
I like her too. Yep. So she really set the record straight when a reporter tried to pin inflation on President Trump, talking about how eggs have skyrocketed under President Trump's term, which has been all of about 2 weeks.
That's right. Yeah,
ignoring the fact, as she pointed out so cleverly, that no, egg prices were up 65.
Exactly right. And doesn't it remind me, it was the same thing that they did with gas prices too. They were crediting Biden for bringing down gas prices from like $5 a gallon. Oh, great. Down from $5.
Even though they were still higher than when Trump came in.
Exactly.
So, I will continue to remind you that inflation has been caused by two primary things: the shutting down of world economies because of COVID and the exorbitant spending that our Congress and government has been so guilty of. It is not really, I guess, productive to point fingers and assign blame at this time. What is productive is changing what is wrong and fixing the problem. And, Trump is so busy at work trying to do just that, and his team as well. I mean, he can't do it single-handedly, obviously. So removing untrustworthy and corrupt people from positions of power and influence is a great start. So getting spending under control is another crucial start. And I think Doge is hard at work at that. I've got a chart to show you, show chart 1 there, on just how out of control government spending has gotten. So, the level line that you see there in black, that shows the path that government spending was on. Look what happens. And then you see the other line that shows what government spending actually did. So the level line is the trajectory of where government spending would have ended up. And then you had COVID. So you had tons of money spent to combat the shutting down of the economy, stimulus checks to individuals, to businesses, all kinds of money that was spent. And then the Biden administration and Congress did not let a good catastrophe go to waste. They continued spending with the ironically labeled Inflation Reduction Act, which was just a way, I think, to gaslight the people into thinking that spending more money would actually help bring inflation down, when that's what caused it in the first place. So, interesting chart there that we see the path that spending is on. So, unless we get spending at least back down to the trajectory that it was on, inflation is going to remain quite sticky. And it was COVID that the government used to launch that greatest spending spree in history. So we've got tariffs, we've got egg prices, we've got Doge. Some of these things are expected to push inflation up. Some of them are expected to push inflation down. So which direction does all of this send inflation? Well, got a couple more charts to show you there. Shows charts 2 and 3. This is the 2-year break-even inflation numbers. So at least we can see, I think the first one there is that the 2-year?
Yes, Shana, that one is the 2-year number. Yep.
So maybe tariffs are inflationary, but maybe not. Maybe more likely they are just going to pass along a one-time price increase to consumers, and maybe you've heard from some companies that they're just going to eat that. So egg prices will likely adjust back down once the new chickens that are being hatched start laying eggs, which doesn't take too incredibly long. And spending comes meaningfully down due to some of the actions that come out of Doge. So the 2-year break-even data is indicating that inflation is going to be sticky where it is, or it may even be moving higher in the short term. So what we see here on the 2-year inflation break-even, yesterday it closed at 2.98%. That is the highest since March of 2023. The 5-year, which is the chart 3, closed at 2.6%. So what this means is that, the 2-year inflation expectation is that inflation is going to average 2.6 over the next 2 years, and 2.98 over the next 2 years, and 2.6 over the next 5 years. So that tells me inflation is probably going to be sticky or maybe on the rise, but there's so much happening. It just remains to be seen yet. So, well, speaking of funding the light, As you know, Financial Issues listeners have been and partners have been instrumental in saving the lives of babies since 2016, when Financial Issues partnered with Preborn Ministry. So since the Dobbs decision, we have seen the pro-life movement gain a lot of momentum, but the battlefield has changed. Now over 60% of abortions are being done through medical abortions. Rather than in abortion clinics, they're being done in people's homes, in their bathrooms. So Preborn is working hard to fight against this new battle by creating a greater digital presence and offering more counseling services. So meeting people where they are. So let's continue to be part of this. Let's help Preborn enter this new battlefield and help them to continue the good fight that they are fighting to push back against the darkness of abortion. So consider donating to Preborn during their Heartbeat campaign, which is happening for the remainder of this week and next week, leading up to Valentine's Day. All right. Let's get to Bess. Bess is calling from California. Hi, Bess. You're live on Financial Issues.
Hi. How are you?
Good.
I have a question regarding a bill that Reagan passed when he was president.
Okay. We'll give it a stab.
Okay. And he passed a bill that, and I work with many coworkers that they could bring their parents from Asia, Philippines, or wherever. They come here and probably from other countries too, but they automatically get Medicare, Social Security, and housing. And I know that because they tell me this. Where I work, there were Filipinos and Chinese there, and they say they don't pay medical bill or nothing. And one of the ladies said her mother even had an apartment that she got free, didn't even really use it because her mother usually stayed with her. So my question is, I believe people bringing their parents that have a good job and everything should sponsor their own parents here instead of coming and taking advantage of Social Security, but they've never worked a day. When I retired, I had worked already 40 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know anything about the specifics on that bill, but I would agree with you that, it just doesn't make financial sense. It doesn't make sense at all for people who don't pay into the system, or their spouses don't pay into the system to be able to get benefits. And that's why you see, when you get your Social Security statement, there's been that warning on there for as long as I've been looking for, I know for at least 20 years, giving us the warning that the Social Security Trust Fund is going to be exhausted within, say 10 years or so. And there's demographic reasons for that, but there's also, unfortunately, we have a lot of people in our government that have made careers out of politics. They haven't worked. Joe Biden, I don't believe, worked a day in his life in the private sector. So, we have people who are making decisions about how to spend money that don't know how to run a business. And if you don't know how to run a business, if you don't know how to balance a budget for your household or for a small business or a large business, how can you be expected to be able to steward responsibly trillion-dollar budgets? So it is a problem.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
And Shanna, we're talking here about the stewardship of future generations too. You and I have talked about this. I'm not banking a nickel on Social Security by the time I get to that age.
But you're paying it every month.
But I'm paying it. I'm paying it through. That's exactly right. It's brutal. And
you're paying it every month, and the ministry's matching it.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And it does come from the top. Bess, I think you're exactly right there. Like, we're seeing awful stewardship from the top down, and it's having an impact far beyond what these people can even see. Yeah, it's frustrating.
I know it's funny that people are getting so nervous about Elon Musk being able to see the Treasury data, and where the payments are going. But how do you hire someone to analyze government efficiency without letting them see where the money's going?
Yeah.
So I don't know if they're going to find everything, but I wish they could find this, because that's a lot of money. Millions and trillions of dollars.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a lot of data to source through, because there's, I don't know how many billions and billions of transactions a year that the Doge team is going to have to sort through. But, that's the real way. I mean, anybody can put together reports. A company can put together a financial report, as we saw, examples with Enron. They're not always honest. But when you look at the raw data, you can't really hide much there. You're going to see where payments are going to. You're going to be able to see very clearly where the waste is in the government. So I'm hopeful that that's going to be a really good thing, and it's going to take probably involvement by Congress and, maybe some executive orders. But, Congress is really the part of our government that has been delegated the responsible of the purse strings. So I really do hope Congress is going to take this seriously, that they're going to start to understand the gravity of what their decisions for reckless spending has resulted in, and they're going to reverse course on that. So thanks for calling, Bess. That was a great point. Thanks for sharing that with us. Well, folks, if you're listening on an outlet that only carries the short version of the show, we encourage you to find the hour-long show on our phone app. Whether you're Apple or Android, you can download it. You can go to financialissues.org or catch us on Apple and Spotify podcasts. For everyone else, stick around. We've got more financial issues right after this.
In the last 10 to 15 years being in ministry, being married, something that has been constant in our lives is Samaritan Ministries. As we've moved, we've had babies, we've had different things come up, we have just been able to rely on Samaritan in ways that we never really even thought about before becoming members.
Our heart's desire is to plant roots and be in a place for a really long time. It's how we were raised. We see the benefits of that, but we also see the open-handedness of being used by the Lord wherever He calls, because we just assumed when we started pursuing church planting, the quickest way to get from point A to point B is a straight line. And with the Lord, sometimes you find out it looks a lot more like this. And yet, Samaritan was with us through the entire thing.
We didn't have to look into, we have to change insurances now because we've moved states or whatever the case may be. And it's just been a real blessing to us in different phases of life.
I'm Kyle.
I'm Colleen.
We're the Gen X.
And we're Samaritan members.
If you don't get life right, you're not going to get all the other issues correct, period. It is the issue that impacts every other issue. Life is the central part of what keeps this republic together. It is the contract that the founding fathers passed down through multiple generations. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You don't have life, you don't have a republic. There is a temptation out there right now. And I want to just tell you we must resist it. There's this temptation that we cast this issue aside. How does that honor God? It doesn't. And if it wasn't for preborn, I would be super just confused and depressed, because there has never been, in my opinion, a more disjointed time in the pro-life movement. We need a machine to go up against the Planned Parenthood beast. Like, we have to play offense against the pro-abortion forces in this country, okay? We have to play offense. And preborn does it in this compassionate, merciful, godly way that is just so inspiring and amazing.
What separates Crossroads Kids Club from other ministries to reach school-age children? What sets you guys apart?
First of all is our connection with local churches. We mobilize, equip, train, support local church partners. We're right inside the schools. There's a number of ministries that try to serve public school children outside of the school, but we're able to be right there on the campus. Another key thing is just our values. Our highest value is actually relationships. And so we're not a ministry that's driven by a lot of fancy technology or flashy stuff, but rather getting adults who love Jesus and who love kids to sit on the floor with a group of kids, to listen to them, to love them. So I would say the relational emphasis and the simplicity of the model is actually something that makes Crossroads special as well.
Help reach kids with the hope of the gospel. Visit reachOurschools.com.
Welcome back to Financial Issues there. It's great to be here with you all this morning. Hey, I can't stress enough how much you need to make sure that you have access to the FISM live chat on financialissues.org/live. You know how we talk about, Sam, people have a God-shaped vacuum in their hearts, and that's absolutely true. It's the most important thing that needs to be filled. But you also have an FISM live chat vacuum in your heart, too. And so you need to fill that. That's exactly right. The second most important. Maybe after your family and all that other stuff. But it's pretty important. So go ahead over there. financialissues.org/live is the place to go for those chat comments.
It's a major part of the hierarchy of needs.
It is. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And we got a lot of doozies there. Good to see George, John, Jason, Claude, Robert, Brian, Lisa, Eddie, so many of you. Uncle John over on the chat as well. Good to see all of you so much. We did get one interesting comment here I saw. I think Brian had mentioned, he saw the news, I'd seen this too, that apparently former President Joe Biden has entered into a contract with an acting agency from Hollywood. And, I thought to myself, Sam, it's interesting because Biden was president. He's been in public office, as Shana mentioned that last segment, for somewhere around 50 years or something like that. But he's kind of been an actor for a lot of that time already. I think a lot of these establishment politicians are. And it's really sad.
No, that's well said.
It's
I
really
imagine
sad,
now he's going to do a remake of Tales from the Crypt, where he can be that old zombie guy who tells the stories. I don't know.
I don't know what he's thinking. But, it really is true. In all honesty, folks, to kind of tie it back into the conversation Shannon and I had with, I believe it was Bess calling from California in that last segment, we do have still a very serious problem in our country with the elites in power who just don't seem to do their jobs very well. And the problem really does come down to, I think, a selfish heart. I really do. You have people in power who are willing to spend without any regard for how it might impact their fellow countrymen. And there's 330 million of them that they have to think about. And so just thinking about that with now, whatever, and listen, Biden is free to do whatever he'd like with his free time. He's not in office anymore. But it is kind of interesting because I feel like politics in America today is a lot of acting. It's a lot of show ponying, far more than it is character and getting things done. And we need more of that. We need more of that in Congress. And we should pray for that, I think.
Well, you know what they say, right? Is that D.C. is Hollywood for ugly people.
That's exactly right. That's how it goes. So, yeah, we'll be keeping an eye on that for you, folks. Hey, we got a great comment from YouTube. I wanted to share this one. Sam, can you share Emma Grace's comment that she shared with us?
Yeah, so she says, I love this. I want to invest, but I've not been able to yet because my conscience just won't let me to put money toward potentially evil fruits. I'm not sure I'll be able to afford it yet, but I love all that you're doing this.
Oh, nice.
Just found you guys. Keep up the good work.
That's awesome. Emma Grace, thanks so much for your encouraging words, and that's wonderful. I'm grateful that you're following your conscience, living within your means. I think that's fantastic. You're obviously in a spot now where you are not ready to invest yet, and that is completely fine. Your first goal here is to follow your conscience and to be a good steward with what God has given you. And we'll be here to help whenever you are ready. But for now, I'd encourage you to keep watching, keep learning, get any debt paid off you have. If you've got that. If you don't have that emergency savings, build that up. And then that might be the time, once you've got that built up, that you might be about time. But before we get to all that, Sam, we have some pretty good news, a little bit of strange news as well, I think, coming out of, we've been keeping an eye on Target. We talked about it a little bit, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, with now they're turning their back, and we're thankful for it, on the woke nonsense. But the battle's not over yet. Apparently there are some shareholders who are very frustrated with Target for having ever gotten into this stuff in the first place. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Target's really in the doghouse, right? And I think maybe they might begin to be really grateful that they're getting rid of their DEI because of this stuff.
Yeah.
We're seeing some pushback from the left right now, angry at Target because they're abandoning DEI, but I think lawsuits like this are going to remind them, this was actually the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So a newly proposed class action lawsuit claims Target defrauded investors by failing to share the financial risks of their DEI programs. This comes from a police pension fund down in Florida, claiming it bought Target stock at an inflated price between August 2022 and November of 2024. That was the height of the DEI stuff, especially when it came to pride gear and pride stuff, really targeted at children. That was the most egregious part. Interesting stuff here. I want you to note this, Seth. The lawsuit said specifically that investors did not know they were supporting Target's, quote, misuse of investor funds to serve political and social agendas.
Did
What do you make of that, Seth?
Did they have their heads under a rock at that point? I mean, were they in a coma at that point? How could you not know?
Maybe
honestly,
they should have subscribed to Financial Issues. We could have helped them out.
That would have been really helpful for them, Sam, truthfully. I don't want to dunk on these guys too hard, but this is unacceptable. You have got to know what you're investing in, especially in this. I mean, everybody was talking about it. At least in our space, we certainly were. You have got to know what you're investing in, folks. You have to know. That's part of why we're here, actually, is we want to give you as much information as we can about these companies, but ultimately, we want you to know where your money is going in terms of how these companies are spending it. And clearly, that seemed to be the issue here, Sam, is these investors were frustrated that apparently they didn't know that Target was doing this stuff. How did they not know? I blame that totally on them. Totally on them for not knowing here.
And I think what they're getting at here a little bit too is that Target misled them in their financial statements by trying to kind of shove this stuff under the rug, saying, there's some blowback, especially in summer of 2023 to their Pride campaign, but they really tried to downplay how bad that reaction was being for their bottom line. A separate lawsuit from America First Legal says Target lost more than $12 billion in market value since launching that Pride collection in 2023. So major blowback and financial losses. So these guys are right to be upset, but you're right, Seth, they really should have been paying attention because it wasn't a big secret that Target was going far left with their policies and that was going to have some pretty negative consequences considering how the culture was going at that time.
Exactly. And, we don't know exactly the reason for it, but Sam, I can't help but think that part of it was not doing their research, but also maybe there was a willingness to give on certain areas. Maybe, like you said, maybe they thought, you know what, they're doing some not so good stuff, but it doesn't seem to be all that bad, and the stock seems to be doing well, so we'll get into it. And then only having learned their lesson, realizing afterwards how bad it really was. Folks, this is a really good lesson for us on compromise. We cannot compromise 1 inch. You give 1 inch on an issue, it's going to turn into 2 feet, and then it's going to turn into several miles, and then it's going to continue and continue and continue. You've got to be strong, steadfast, immovable, with a backbone for the truth. And this counts in our investing, and counts in every area of life as well. So I think it's really important for us to think about that for sure. Folks,
Seth, considering it's a pension fund too, it's also possible that they were just looking at what other pensions were doing. So they just were going along to get along. They didn't want to do their own research. And I don't want to let them off the hook because of that, because that's what so many other people do too. Individual investors just either look at what their company's doing for their investment, for their 401k, and they say, well, that's what they're doing, so I'm going to go along with that. That's what my advisor's doing, so I'm just going to do what he says, and not take control of their finances, which is stewarded to you. God gave you the responsibility over your finances. That's why they're called your finances, not your advisors, not your company's 401k. Those are your responsibility to take control of, and it's not only up to you to get value back out of that, to make it grow, but also to make sure that it's going to good, God-honoring things.
Yep. That's a really important reminder for us, Sam, is these companies, we give them control of our money to operate their business and churn a profit. It's never not ours, though. If you're investing that money, it's always your money. And that's why you got to be so careful about where it's going. You got to make sure that you're doing it in a way that honors God. I think a final lesson for us to think about with this is really actually in that same idea of lessons. Has Target learned its lesson? I'd love to hear your thoughts on the chat, folks. We've seen the boycotts. We've seen all this stuff come out here. Have they learned their lesson? Will this be enough? I think the question needs to be considered, if someone does something foolishly, continuously, over and over again for a long period of time, are they really going to learn their lesson if finally they have a lawsuit like this? I don't know. Time's going to tell for sure. But folks, this is another reminder for us. Keep the pedal to the metal. This movement is growing. Let's make our voices known through our dollars. These companies need to just be in the business of doing business. We got the Ag Report coming up here, and then more financial issues right after this. Hang with us.
This is Craig Haugaard with your Financial Issues Ag Update for February 5th. A corn pushed higher yesterday as trade war fears diminished and funds continued to add to their long position. Traders were also encouraged by the announcement of the sale of corn to South Korea. March corn finished the day 5 3/4 cents higher at $4.94.5. The firmness in beans was reportedly due to the idea that as a result of the slow Brazilian harvest, the Chinese reserve may need to refill their stocks with U.S. origin soybeans. The domestic news was positive as well, with the oilseed crushing report showing a record crush of 200 117.7 million bushels in December. March beans finished the day 16 3/4 cents higher at $10.75 per bushel. Wheat had a turbulent day as they started lower and then staged a decent rally. The weaker dollar and fund buying drove that rally. In international news, Russian wheat exports for February are projected to be just half of what they were in February of 2024. Higher Russian prices and a bit tighter supply versus last year as cited as the reason. And this may open up opportunities for U.S. wheat. Minneapolis March wheat was 5 1/4 cents higher at $6.21 3/4. Kansas City rose by 9 cents to close at $5.94 3/4. And Chicago was 10 1/4 cents higher at $5.77. Cotton futures reacted positively to the lower dollar. At the closing bell, March futures were 90 points stronger at $66.94. Livestock futures had a mixed performance. April live cattle were $1.50 lower at $188.65 per hundredweight. March feeder cattle dropped by $2.25, settling at $268.25 per hundred. While April lean hog futures were $3.40 higher, closing out the day at $89.75 per hundredweight. Class 2 milk futures clawed back some of last week's losses to get back to just shy of where we were at last Thursday's close. The closing bell, March futures were 31 points higher at $19.93. This has been Craig Haugaard with your Financial Issues Ag Update. We'll be right back with more financial issues after this.
It's up to us to stand up and say, enough is enough. All of this unbiblical stuff that's going on, whether it's abortion or transsexual or LGBTQ, widespread pornography, human trafficking. Bottom line, it's still up to us. If we stop investing in these corporations that are trying to destroy us, sooner or later they're going to wake up.
To learn more about biblically responsible mutual funds and ETFs, go to timothyplan.com.
Hearing Jesus say, "Well done," how to secure your rewards in heaven. Don't you want to be sure that when you get there, that you're going to have the best life forever? And that best life forever is being able to access the plethora of wonderful, escalating rewards that are elucidated throughout the book of Revelation to those who overcome. Well, that's what the book's about, friend.
Order your copy of Hearing Jesus Say Well Done today on Amazon and start living for what truly matters.
Every day, kids all across America are coming to school with some kind of hidden pain.
I've seen kids come in who are just so confused about what's right and what's wrong, just having no idea that God loves them. And this just breaks my heart. Crossroads has the opportunity to bring the Word of God right into the public school, to reach children right where they are.
And when we see that happen, we see God changing lives.
We want to see kids not only come to Christ, but pursue a lifelong relationship with Him. And so local churches are uniquely positioned to disciple those children as they become young adults and through their lifespan.
Crossroads comes alongside a church and provides that church with a club structure, curriculum, training, and ongoing coaching for them to run these outreaches in public schools.
If you are burdened for the children of America, consider making a donation to Crossroads Kids Club. For more information, visit reachOurschools.com. That's reachOurschools.com.
The opinions and recommendations expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of the station or any of the program sponsors. Additionally, all products or services offered by the program sponsors may not be known by the program.
Welcome back, everybody. Good conversation there. I appreciate you all so much hanging with us, and so many on the chat as well. Once again, great to see you all this morning. So the markets here, they seemed to calm down yesterday from the tariff-fueled tizzy, as we call it. They were in on Monday. So by midday yesterday, comfortably positive. The Dow Jones was the one that was kind of hanging around the flat line. The S&P 500 and the NASDAQ were riding pretty high. We saw a good earnings call from Palantir, so that certainly helped. Then by late afternoon, it was a lot of the same. The markets steadied out, looked for a clean sweep to end the day, and they did get 3 for 3 in the winning numbers yesterday. So by the closing bell, the Dow Jones was up 1.35%. The S&P 500 was up almost 0.75%, and the NASDAQ was up about 1/3%, a little less than 1/3. So as of right now, as the markets have opened, kind of mixed. A little bit on the negative side, though. The Dow Jones is right around the flat line. It's technically positive. The S&P 500 down about 1/10, and the NASDAQ leading the way downward, almost 1/5% down. So I think probably having a little something to do with those earnings reports that Shana had mentioned earlier in the program. That's what the markets are looking like here as we start, folks. Another really interesting headline that I'd love to get Sam's thoughts on, that many Americans apparently are dissatisfied with their savings. What can you tell us about this, Sam?
Yeah. I mean, it's probably not surprising, right? Yeah. Considering what we were talking about earlier in the show with inflation. But let's take a look at these numbers.
Yeah.
A recent Yahoo Finance Marist poll shows that more than a third of Americans, about 35%, are dissatisfied with their savings, compared to only 22% who said they actually are satisfied with the way things are going. Nearly half, that's 48% of respondents, saved less in 2024 than they did in 2023. Not good. Roughly the same also cited the cost of living as their biggest obstacle to saving. It should be noted, Seth, in this poll, I think only 5 to 8%, something along those lines, said that overspending was the reason that their savings were so bad. Most of it was cost of living. Prices are just too high, unexpected bills, things along those lines. There is hope, however. 60% of respondents did say they're more optimistic about their finances now that Donald Trump is president. Really interesting. Gen Z, of all people, at 70% is the most optimistic right now about President Trump and the economy.
Yeah, very interesting. You know, Sam, I agree with that. I feel that optimism as well. Sometimes, I don't know if you've thought this, but I think back to these 4 years and I'm thinking, okay, I started here right as the first Trump administration was ending. I started at FISM, and I had a child during that time. My wife got pregnant again later on, and I'm shocked that I made it. I'm shocked that I made it without having to go bankrupt or having to sell the house or anything like that. And I really am grateful. I'm grateful to the Lord. But I don't know if you feel that way, Sam, with just how bad things were in those last 4 years.
It does feel like a dream that you're waking up and you're looking back really and thinking, how was that even possible that I survived and got to this point? So it is really incredible. But when you're in the thick of it, you don't always recognize how bad it is. It's only in retrospect that you realize, wow, that was really tough.
Yeah, absolutely. So, that number that you brought up too, Gen Z being so optimistic, I mean, 70%, that's huge. I think that's exciting. And I certainly don't want to miss the fact that we've been seeing a growing number of younger listeners and younger partners as well. And so, part of the fun of the show is it's a balancing act to speak to the long timers, to speak to those in 50s, 60s, 70s. You've been with us. You've been using the FISM model. You remember Dan well. And then also to the young people who have joined us recently. Maybe some of you were gifted a partnership, for example, at Christmas time. But I do want to speak to the youngsters for just a moment here and hopefully give you some words of encouragement, a few pointers in light of this, because maybe you're one of those who is dissatisfied with your savings, but you are excited for the opportunity that you have to come in these next 4 years. And so you're thinking, I want to do something about this. Now's the time to do it. And I would agree with you. I think now is. So a couple of words of encouragement for you. Number one, consider this order of business: paying off debt, complete the savings fund, begin investing. Now, I'm not saying that it always happens that way, but I think that as a template is really good for you, especially if you have that. You might be in a situation where you don't have debt, and that's great. And then your next step would be building up that 3 to 6 month emergency savings fund. Great goal to achieve. If you hit that 3 to 6 month number, by the way, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world to aim to keep going also. If you end up getting to that 1 year mark, that's great too. At the same time, I think you got to counterbalance that to say, okay, I don't want to go overboard and become a hoarder with my money. But having that emergency fund saved up is really, really good for emergencies. Now, a question that you might be asking if you're a young person, and I've asked the same question too, is what do I do if I have to spend some or a good chunk or even all of my savings? I will be frank with you all weeks ago. I had a really good emergency savings fund set up, and then our pipes burst. And so I reluctantly but willingly, because I wanted to have running water in our house, took a large chunk of that savings to pay off the burst pipes. And
Seth,
I felt
isn't it
guilty.
Always when you start to feel good about your savings, you have to dip into it every time.
Sam, it's so funny that happens. It's like you get to the goal, you barely get the goal, or you're almost there, and then something happens where you have to spend a lot of it. And folks, that's the way it happens, right, Sam? I mean, that's what we have to remember here is that this emergency savings fund is meant for emergencies. I feel guilty spending that money because I'm like, oh, now it's down. Now I have to build it back up again. But then I have to remember, hold on a second. That's what it's there for. It's there for burst pipes. Dan always used to talk about if your transmission blows. That's what it's there for. If you need new tires on your car, that's what it's there for.
You were talking about how did you possibly survive the Biden economy? That's how you did it, right?
That's
you had
exactly
this
right.
cushion saved up during the good times so that when things got bad, you can dip into that. So
and it's
that's
little
not a
by
bad
little.
thing. I mean, you don't like to see that number go down, but you're right. That's why it's there.
Yep. And I feel guilty. I do. I'm confessing to all of you. I feel guilty spending that money. I'm like, I hit that goal and now it's gone. I have to build it up again. It's okay. I'm speaking to myself too. It's okay. It's what it's there for. It's what it's there for. And that's why it's different also from your investing money too. We want to make that very clear that the money that you have to invest should be separate, set aside money that you don't need to worry, oh, my transmission blew in my car. I need this money, but oh no, the markets are down because, China just created another DeepSeek or something like that. That's why they're separate. That's why you need that emergency savings. So take a deep breath, get on your knees, thank God that you have the money, and then start to rebuild it. Climb back up to the top. Start to put away little by little, reload. But again, it's little by little. It's going to take time. The question of where to put it, I think, is a good one as well. We talk a lot about banks and credit unions for sure. As long as it's an institution that you trust and it's one that has either the FDIC funding to be able to have insurance on it or the equivalent funding if you're using a credit union, we think that's fine too. But putting it in an account that you can access easily. So it might not be a place that will grow as much, but it's one that you can grab it easily and make those payments for sure. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world either to have a small amount of emergency hard cash on hand as well. We've talked about this a lot, folks. Many of you have asked how much emergency cash should I have on hand. I don't think there's really a number for it. I think the good parameter for it is, think about this. If you're in a crisis situation, we talk often about an end times type situation or a World War III or a nuclear situation where the power is down, banks are shut off, you can't access your money, and you need to get somewhere. You need to get to the hospital because one of your kids has an emergency. You need to get to a safe house where there's food and water. You need to get somewhere, and maybe it's an hour drive away, and you got to fill up your gas tank, and gas has spiked to $10 a gallon. You need enough money to be able to fill up your tank. So a couple $100 it might be. It could be $1,000. Some people are comfortable with, could be a little more, could be a little less, but that would be a good idea to have. You don't need to put all of it under your mattress. I wouldn't encourage that. I don't think Shana would either. So just some encouraging words for you there. It's not the worst thing to have a little bit on hand for an emergency. The bottom line, though, is if you're dissatisfied with your savings, that means it's time to do something about it. Time to do something about it. One of our core tenets, the way you do this, you live within your means. And Sam, you'd mentioned it earlier. I do think that's the answer to how we were able to survive these last 4 years, is by figuring out, and Dan taught it to us so well, is live within your means. If it means living modestly, then live modestly. If it means that you don't have cable television, then be content to not have it. If it means that, like for a time, Megan and I didn't have internet and it was to save money. We could have afforded it, but it was enabled us to be able to save money. We have it now. We're grateful for it. Make those types of decisions. People don't always think about that stuff, but those could be the types of things that you do. To be able
great
to live
advice, Seth.
So,
I would recommend one thing. I agree with your order here about pay off debt, complete savings funds, and then begin investing. I will say, though, one of the things that kind of falls in this in-between area is investing in your company's 401k. I would recommend, regardless of where you are on this list, to try to get some of that match. Try to get the free money. If your company offers a 5% match, I'd say get that match.
100%.
That's just money you're leaving on the table. Of course, make sure that it's a biblically responsible match, but that's just free money you're leaving aside. So I would be sure to do that.
It's a great point, Sam. By the way, Timothy Plan does offer 401ks and 403bs, so if you're looking for a good place to go for biblically responsible options, Timothy Plan is great. But Sam, I agree completely. And to build off of that as well, you might find yourself in a situation where you had to pay down your emergency fund, or even, God forbid, you had to go into debt again. This would be the time where I'd tell you, if you've already got that discipline of continuing to invest, like what Sam said, adding to the 401k, try your best to not stop that, right, Sam? Continue to do that.
I'm a believer in the habit of, even if you're at the bottom of this rung, you're still in the debt payoff stage, you might want to still be in the habit of putting $5 to $10 into an investment account separately, an individual investment account. You're not really going to be building too much money, but what you're doing there is you're still keeping that discipline intact.
Habit. That's exactly right. And that's going to serve you well in the long run. You're building it up little by little. but muscles to be able to do it well. So I hope that was helpful for all of you folks. I really appreciate you hearing us out there. Great insight on the chat as well. So many of you. I hope you'll join us again tomorrow. Listen, you don't want to miss out on it. It's a ton of fun. Also, tomorrow morning, Shana will be back live for us. So you got to get your calls queued up early. Have to get them get those calls queued up. 610-363-1110. Great to be here with you today, folks. Until next time, remember, everything you have belongs to the Lord. So let's be good and faithful stewards with it. God bless you all. See you next time.
If we ever forget that we're one nation under God, then we will be a nation gone under.
Thank you for joining us. This has been an FISM production.